Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes have revealed the Singapore Grand Prix might present their best chance of actually beating Red Bull this season. Red Bull don't seem incredibly confident that it's going to be a great weekend for them, and Mercedes reckon it's going to be a far better time for them than they were in Monza, despite only being around about 3/10 off pole a week or so ago. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, we've got to talk about the driver lineup for next season, because lots of updates on this. Alfa have basically said they're not just here to develop young drivers anymore, implying that Ricciardo's probably going to stay. The most recent understanding we have on this is that it's kind of, potentially at least, Lawson versus Tsunoda for the second seat. They expect Ricciardo to stay, and whether Perez is at Red Bull or not probably depends on the whole Norris situation rather than the Ricciardo situation. So that's the update there. But we also have to talk about Felipe Drugovich. The Formula 2 champion from last season has sat as a reserve driver this year for Aston Martin and has, I think, turned down a move to Formula E and has now turned down an IndyCar test. And, you know, he's had some big, good teams in those respective categories reaching out to Drugovich to try and get him involved. He has said no to these opportunities, which some would say that's a mistake, some would say that's a good decision, but I can't imagine that he would do this unless he felt relatively confident there might be a Formula 1 seat shortly arriving on the table. But this is unlikely to be an Aston Martin, right? Because, well, unless Lance Stroll decides himself to retire, and yes, probably Lawrence Stroll has to answer the questions of some of his shareholders, like, hey, are we sure this is the best for the team and for, let's say, position in the championship and therefore the prize money they get, having your son as the driver when he's getting bodied by Fernando Alonso? Now, Mike Crack says, the team principal, he's on a similar level, nothing to see here. Obviously, the results don't paint that as the reality, but this is something that you say when, you know that that's going to be your man, so you've kind of got to stand by him because his father's not going to make any different decisions. So this is the question at Aston Martin, and it makes me feel like Drugovich isn't going to be going there. So where's the alternative? Especially turning down an IndyCar test when you don't really want to spend 2 years out of racing. Maybe you can get away with it, but it's really not ideal at Drugovich. Usually after 1 year out, you've really got to be doing something to keep your hat in the ring, as it were, especially if you're trying to get to Formula 1. This is why people are looking at Alfa Romeo. The rumour is that Zhou Guanyu's seat is far from confirmed, and Felipe Drugovich is confident he can get that seat alongside Bottas for next season. So that's the belief right now, that he's in contention for that seat and believes he can get it, and therefore is turning down some other opportunities. But then other sources are saying that Zhou is now very close to signing an extension and possibly even further, so who knows what's going on at the moment. It's really difficult to say. There's also Mick Schumacher to talk about, and Toto Wolff has said that he absolutely deserves a seat on the grid, but he can't get one. And look, if he really deserved a seat on the grid, you would have hired him instead of George Russell, but he's just not good enough to deserve a Mercedes seat. So maybe Williams, but maybe not. Maybe Alfa Romeo. I don't know. It's tough for Mick Schumacher. It's tough for the likes of Felipe Drugovich as well. There has also been talk about Alex Palou, who was confirmed as the IndyCar champion last weekend, but again had a good race yesterday and I believe made the podium and, well, had a very solid finish to the season as expected with a driver of his quality. But I will say, he does cause a lot of drama, right? And Alex Palou is 26 years old now, and I personally believe that if he doesn't come to Formula 1, it would be a potential loss, a bit of a what could have been moment if Palou did get a chance. He is turned down, and there's all sorts of drama with McLaren because he was meant to be joining McLaren's IndyCar team. Part of the reason why McLaren have got a load of IndyCar guys is because they can kind of promise them a Formula 1 seat, but a lot of those promises don't really lead anywhere, especially right now with Norris and Piastri. But then again, if Norris was to go to Red Bull, then an opportunity might arise for a Pato Award. I think Pato Award, his finish result yesterday at Laguna Seca, actually secured him the super license, so that's an interesting piece of information as well. But yeah, Palou does seem to cause a lot of drama, and I'm not sure he's made the best decisions in terms of where he's gone and who he's caused problems with over the last couple of seasons, so that might be limiting his chances for Formula 1, and it's not like there's a great seat available, apart from maybe Williams, which is probably a pretty decent seat, at least in terms of the way they are progressing at the moment. AlphaTauri also might be. We believe they're going to take absolutely everything they can from Red Bull next season, and that's going to begin in Singapore. They're going to bring a Red Bull-inspired set of upgrades, and they will maximally exploit the technical collaboration with Red Bull. So that is promising for them, promising for Tsunoda and for Liam Lawson, because Ricciardo won't be back for another couple of races, is what we presently believe. Now, who's going to win in Singapore? This is the track that Helmut Marko has said and Red Bull have said they're not so sure about. Let's be honest though, they did win here last year with Sergio Perez by quite some margin, and Verstappen was on course to go P1 in qualifying by an absolute mile, but ran out of fuel, and therefore they had to pull him into the pits. So otherwise, if he'd have finished the lap and got pole, he then would have been disqualified and started right from the back. So they started him further up than that, and Verstappen and Alonso and Hamilton all tried to make moves, largely unsuccessfully, because anywhere offline in those wet conditions last year, dry conditions, there was just no grip. So, you know, if the likes of Verstappen and Hamilton, Alonso and others making big mistakes in Singapore, it shows there was tricky conditions. But Verstappen couldn't make much progress, but Perez got the job done anyway. So it makes you think, well, surely Red Bull are going to be good. This year's car's way better than last year's Red Bull. So, you know, it aligns for a Red Bull victory again. But they are not so sure. Even Verstappen says it's not going to be our strongest weekends. And let's not forget, back in Canada, it wasn't a very strong weekend for them there. They still won, of course, with Verstappen. But the belief was that their setup didn't work perfectly well for Canada. So opportunities for other teams will arise. It might not be Singapore, but Singapore is a circuit where it is challenging to overtake. If you can get P1 in qualifying, you potentially can hold on. The point that I was making about Monza was that if Leclerc and Sainz had both out-qualified Verstappen, there is a realistic chance that as a duo, like let's say Sainz is leading, Leclerc is P2 with DRS, the Verstappen wouldn't have been able to get past both of them as long as Leclerc kept in Sainz's DRS. So there was a chance there, and let's say theoretically it's a Ferrari 1-2 in qualifying or a Mercedes 1-2 in qualifying for Singapore, it's very plausible that, you know, the only way that Red Bull win is on strategy, which they'll probably still find a way to make that work, but, you know, maybe you can't pass on track as easily if you can qualify ahead. That's where Mercedes also have some confidence, saying that Hamilton says basically, given their current package, Monza is the worst it's going to get. Their car does not suit that type of circuit, and therefore that was like the worst it's going to be from now to the end of the season, relative to Ferrari, where they're roughly 1-2 tenths off in race trim, and relative to Red Bull, of course, who are much faster and further down the road. But in qualifying pace, George Russell put in a really good lap that was only roughly 3.5 tenths off pole, which, given the weaknesses of the Mercedes at that circuit, is actually pretty good for them. And at Singapore, they feel far more confident.
Will the Singapore track suit the car more? Well, we're certainly hoping so. But there's reason to think that the car will work better because Singapore is a maximum downforce circuit, and our performance at the high downforce tracks, if you look at Barcelona, Budapest, even Zandvoort in the race, the car was working well. We've had pretty strong performance. So we're hoping to be able to be a bit quicker there and get back to a position where we can challenge for podiums. Now, the track though does throw up some pretty unique challenges, and we've also got some layout changes for this year. So there's a sequence of 4 corners near the end of the lap. They've been removed where the track used to go underneath a grandstand through a tunnel. That's now gone, so we've got a longer straight, which will change a little bit how the tyres are working. There's a bit less energy there, but it's also an abrasive tarmac. We've got the softest 3 compounds, so it's a pretty tough race on the tyres, and it's also a bumpy street circuit, and added to that, the races run at night. So plenty of challenges for us to try and tackle to get our heads round, but as I said, we're going there optimistic for a strong performance.
So Mercedes say they are optimistic for a strong performance in Singapore. They weren't great there last year, but as we've said, the higher downforce tracks tend to suit this Mercedes. The 13 and also the W14 significantly better than the other ones. Yes, the circuit's a bit bumpy. It's a street circuit. Maybe that's not great for the Mercedes, but still, we know that Hamilton's got a special lap in him around here from time to time, and if he can deliver that, who knows what's possible. So yeah, Red Bull are basically saying that if we win this weekend, we're going to win everything, and and Mercedes reckon that maybe this is going to be their chance. The Ferrari is an interesting debate because some are saying that the Ferrari is actually going to be pretty good around here. They were terrible at Zandvoort, let's not forget. Sainz said they were the 6th fastest car, but Julian Ladekesa says that this revised layout should make it less unfavourable for the SF23. Red Bull think that Ferrari are going to be their nearest competitor this weekend, which I'm not so convinced is going to be the case. To be honest, I don't think Ferrari really know. They go in weekend to weekends. I'm not sure they fully know where their car's going to be. So maybe it's going to be good, maybe it's going to be bad. But I don't, and maybe Aston could be good as well. But the rumour is, especially with the new changes, the technical directive that's coming in this weekend, Aston Martin might be more heavily impacted by that than others because they already had to change their front wing earlier in the season as a result of some of these flexibility tests. And the theory is that maybe they're going to get affected by this a little bit more. And some engineers are saying that this flexi wing TD is actually more impactful than TD39 last year for the flexi floors. So we'll see if that means anything, which teams get affected. But the theory is that Aston Martin aren't exactly going to be right back on top as they, were at the start of the season relative, at least to Mercedes and to Ferrari. Now, before we close out the video, got to discuss something completely hilarious here, to be honest, which is this whole Massa trying to get the 2008 world title. If you guys don't know any of the background on this, the Singapore Grand Prix at 2008 was the Crashgate scandal where Renault got Nelson Piquet Jr. to crash. Alonso won the race, and the belief is that at the time they knew, Bernie Ecclestone, Max Mosley, they knew about this and they should have voided that race. Now, if those points for that race weren't considered, then Massa would have won the title because Hamilton outscored Massa on that race weekend. Then again, was it Hamilton's fault? No, and it was actually Ferrari's fault for messing up Massa's pit stop as a result of all that drama. And if you're going to say, and this is the thing, like there's so many issues with this attempted legal challenge, is that sure, if you do just void that race, then yeah, maybe you've got a point. But we are also 15 years down the line, which makes things significantly more complicated. But even then, how do you know if that race was voided at the time, as arguably it could or should have been, then who's to say the decisions made in the upcoming races would have been the same? Almost certainly they wouldn't have been. So I don't think you can really look at it through that lens. And, Hamilton could also quite rightly say that his penalty that he got in Spa was, pretty outrageous, at least it seems to me, and a lot of people at the time. So, maybe he could try and come and legal challenge for that. I don't know. The funny thing is, though, is that Massa's legal team have actually said that Hamilton should support them in their challenge to get rid of his first world title. I can't believe the audacity of these guys to imagine that Hamilton's going to be on board with this. The lawyers, are they just doing this for publicity? I don't really understand. I know they're going to get a big payday from this. Ferrari as well. Ferrari have said we ain't going near this. We're not supporting you in this legal challenge. It ain't going to happen, buddy. But whatever. Massa's going to try it, and the lawyers are going to keep, pumping this PR out because, as they say about Hamilton, the actual champion of the season, he is an important ambassador for the sport and has always defended sporting integrity. He is an honorary Brazilian citizen and is well liked by the Brazilians, of course. Massa's Brazilian, so I hope he will support us. We have nothing against Hamilton. It's what do you think Hamilton's going to do? He's going to come in support of this bid to take away his first title and his only one from McLaren? Dream on. You know what I mean? Unbelievable scenes. But very much enjoying your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.